Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to the Halftime Talk feature interview series. I'm delighted today to be joined by Gisele Widdershoven, founder and strategic advisor at Blue Water Strategy. Gisele, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for inviting.
Great. Well, Gisele, I mean, obviously your remit spans a lot of expertise, but let's we're going to be focusing today on shipping and emissions and how that's being impacted and impacting perhaps even investment decisions and supply chains around the world. Maybe we can start with sort of a bit of an anniversary, 1 year on from the Fuel EU Maritime kicked off presumably last January in 2025. Would you say that has had much impact or absorption so far when you look at EU shipping and ports?
Yeah, well, actually, yes, because it came effective as well. And let's a little bit talk ABC Fuel EU. So not assuming that everybody knows about that, but it's really focusing on carbon intensity. It caps carbon intensity for the energy used by ships. And it is for calling EU ports regardless of flag. Okay, so that's to start with.
Okay.
Fuel EU also tightened the cap from 2025 onwards. So that also changed. Additionally, also, it includes other emission like methane and nitrous oxide for the full life cycle of fuel used on board. And it requires also for the ships at berth to use OPS, offshore power supply, or zero emission fuel to reduce pollution at ports. Right?
Okay, well, so that's a long list of requirements, isn't it? So how has that shaped the cost competitiveness in shipping or obviously competition? Again, I mean, the effectiveness of this now being implemented, have stakeholders responded, do you think, efficiently? Are there some that are lagging behind? Are there issues with implementation? But from a cost competitive point of view, is it reshaping shipping to any significant degree, or was there enough preparation, do you think, by all stakeholders?
It is. Well, preparation, that depends on how you interpret this. So to be honest, it has a big impact because it looks at all to a kind of competitiveness factor, right? So the fuel choice become a competitor factor. So normally speaking, you would say conventional fuel is cheaper on paper, right? But then if you start to apply the fines and penalty introduced by Fuel EU, the economics flip. And you are looking into a different aspects, right? And okay, what am I going to choose? And is it close? Can I get a discount? So also your procurement strategy also change. That's one aspect of it. Another aspect also, it impacts shipping segments, right? So cruises and ferries have a kind of unavoidable exposure because they have a linear network, right? While, for example, bulk or container ships can have the optionality to say, okay, I'm going to reroute, I'm going to balance my voyage, and so on. So that reshape the network segment or the shipping segment. And also for ports. So if I am able to offer an infrastructure or a clean fuel, zero emission fuel, then I will be ultimately also a preferred hub. And then you also could lag in other port the risk of losing transshipment volumes. So you see also that the geography or the segments or the ports also preference will also change. So so there is a big impact in putting it one plus one, right, for the whole value chain. So what you see is that Fuel EU becomes a little bit of turns carbon intensity into competitiveness factor, right? For
Of
ports, for
course.
ship, for routes, whatever.
Okay, I mean, in the carbon border adjustment mechanism, also, in terms of that's getting even more into the specifics. I mean, how's that impacted, or is it impacting, or how will it impact more likely as it gets implemented more Europe's sort of imports of energy, or choices between LNG, oil and products, coal. Again, the CBAM, is that now sort of fully enforced, or and again, how is it impacting thinking of energy imports and supply chain, obviously?
Well, CBAM is effective as of January this year, right?
Yeah,
So
so
that's
very
no,
new.
yeah.
Yeah,
So okay, so it includes six sectors: fertilizer, cement, iron, steel, aluminium, hydrogen, and electricity. That's the scope at present, with a possibility and looking forward that the scope will be also extended or expanded to machinery, appliances, and maybe other oil products, right? So it looks also into the emission embedded in products. So from the extraction till even to decommissioning, right? So that's one of the things as
mm,
well. So while, for example, Fuel EU looks at the carbon intensity that look for the ship, right? That looks into the cargo on the ship and the
of
embedded
course.
emissions in the products, right? So that's how it goes at this moment. Oil products, hydrocarbons, LNG is not yet in scope, but that could change again, right? So how that impact eventually also the whole supply chain, then you
Mm,
will see also that you will need also to submit these kind of certificates or documentation, which is required to be reported, monitored, and verified. Okay, so if you already don't have the system to be able to do that, or even miss some data, which is actually in practicality that is the case, right? Then also default values will be applied, which could be a penalty, higher, less, or even not needed, right? That comes to you. How that affect also the supply chain, that will be an additional price on the product. Okay,
course.
so
So, I mean, just on that one point, one word you use is verification. Is that certification verification secure and in place? I mean, it's just as you said, CBAM's just started. Is the paperwork and data gathering ahead of that ready?
So some, of course, some entity and some places
Mm,
are really fully, and that's also what is going to make the differentiation factor, right? Okay, how well are you prepared with the verification, the reporting, the monitor,
yeah.
and providing these checkpoints? And there is, okay, there is. What you see actually, if you have watched the news recently, you see that ships are being stopped at ports because they don't have the right documentation, right? So that produce delays, make you look into your procurement again strategy, right? So I would want to maybe go for a greener product, right? I would want also to see how am I going to pass these costs. Is it going to be for
Yeah.
me? Is it going to be for the ship? Is it going to be for the end clients? We are easily sometimes passing the cost to the end client, which is the voter in Europe, which is not going to be happy, right? I'm trying to be political here, but yeah,
Yes, yes.
okay.
And of course, you have the whole, I mean, on top of all this at the moment, in the last year, we've had, of course, generally the tariff stress, haven't we, in terms of
Yeah.
cost to nations of all imports, not just what we're being, not just carbon specific, but that surely can't be helping things that the EU, for example, countries are under extra stress because of general tariff costs that they're trying to obviously figure out and negotiate. Did you think that has compounded the problem for their sort of carbon initiatives, if you like, or carbon intentions?
Well, I need to still be positive. Okay, we need to look into
Mm,
the positive side of the story. Okay, so all of these policies regulation is aiming to reduce emissions, help the climate, and so on. So the initial objective is nice. How is being implemented related to market dynamics, current
Of course.
situation, that's another thing, which is at the end, if I put it mildly, not totally helpful and certainly in related to cost and competitiveness
Of
and
course.
level playing field. Yeah.
And I mean, of course, you got the EU doing what it's trying to do within the continent, and then you have the IMO, which is obviously the global boss of what's happening on the maritime seas. And of course, they come out with their particular directives every few years. We had the big IMO 2020. We have some more milestones last year and this year coming up. How are those measures interacting with the EU? Strategy, if you like? Are they in tandem with that? Do they complicate matters for the EU?
Okay. Let me also try to put it mildly, but also explain, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So the IMO have progressed in what they call a net zero framework and a global carbon pricing, right? Unfortunately, and I'm saying unfortunately for some reasons, this has not been agreed upon. And the positiveness is that will be agreed upon next year, coming effective in 2028, right? So that's the general idea.
Mm.
So what you'll see is, if it's current and it's looking at, you will see a kind of regulatory stack. You have EU ETS, you have Fuel EU, you have the IMO,
Yeah.
which means higher costs and a lot of uncertainty. If I want to say sometimes also is, you have now multiple systems, multiple compliance requirements for systems that might be not totally working together. Okay. The positive side of the story is IMO is global. So it equalizes everybody. Because right now you have the regulation regional for
Of
the
course.
EU,
Mm.
and you are, kind of a victim in this whole thing. IMO will make everybody the same, will apply it for all the same. Since it is global, let's say it is for everybody, that might drive reducing a little bit the regional measures, right? And
Okay.
looking for harmonization. Okay. That's really typically the overall. And in the meantime, also you could look into, okay, what practicality can I use to decrease my risk, right? So like using practicality in hedge by building flexible fuel ships or looking into fuel contracts and so on.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned flexible fuel ships. Of course, new ships, whether they're flexible fuel or original ones, but new, that all takes, of course, a lot of investment. And with the IMO 2020, I remember now a few years ago, we were talking to a lot of shipping stakeholders and in terms of, getting rid of old vessels, investing in new, this is a big, big commitment. And it's also there's a time element to that investment as well. And there seemed to be some hesitancy because of changes in IMO directives, because, as you said, that you've got the regional and the global. How has the shipping sector so far responded to that? Are they getting better at taking risk by investing in new vessels for new fuels that are obviously also in development, or repurposing old vessels, as the case might be? Are the right incentives being given to the shipbuilders from the regulatory framework to invest in what's needed in the future for lower carbon emissions?
So yeah, you have a different aspect of questions here and how they're reacting, and so I'll try to pick
Yeah.
a couple of points to try to answer
But I
you.
mean, my question really is, as a shipper, as a ship owner, what incentive do I have to spend a lot of money on new ships that will be fuel ready if the fuel directives might be changing uh, unexpectedly in the future? What guarantee do I have that my investment will be the right decision?
I'm trying to think to be again political here because there is
Yeah,
good
it's
things
okay. I mean,
happening.
you can be politically incorrect.
There
Yeah.
is there is a starting of a lot of initiatives helping investment and either putting a what we call it STIP or investment plan, or even trying to find subsidies and so on. So there is a lot of things going on trying to give these incentives, right?
Mm.
Is it enough? would it be for this and that? Where is it exactly? But you have again another incentive, which is, I don't know if it's a nice incentive. If you're not doing this, you're going to pay still, right? So how can the matter is now, how am I
Yeah.
going to avoid this cost, or uh, play with this cost, right? And how can I also kind of divide or pass through, or how am I going to make sure that I am still profitable?
Yeah.
Let's say if we're talking blindly about a business, how the sector is reacting is different per business, per culture, per even how the ship is even constructed, for which
Of
cargo,
course.
and so on.
Retrofitting, etc. Yeah.
And you might see big companies maybe taking risk, and saying, okay, hey, maybe I am from all my fleets going to try out one or two, and also exercise pooling, right? Because one could offset the rest of my pool of my fleet, for example. But I am in one way compliant, and also I am also avoiding costs. I am not having possibility of a stranded asset, because you build the ship and stay with it 25, 30 years. You're not just going
Exactly.
to.
Yeah.
Smaller company is reacting differently, especially if they have thin margin, because okay, we don't know really yet which fuel will be chosen over the other. Might be worth while watching. That could have also a kind of disadvantage, by the way, right?
I mean, talking about new fuels, Giselle, I mean, which ones do you feel will make headway in the next 2, 3 years? You've obviously got some already in development. Would we see anything? Well, what are the top things to look out for, do you think, that's sort of low-lying fruit for new fuels in the sector that perhaps aren't being pushed enough or aren't being taken up because of regulation, clarity, etc.?
Well, if you look to IMO, because they're promoting already some fuels, even that this is not yet effective, but you see biofuel, e-methanol, ammonia. Okay,
Yeah.
now it comes into again is the infrastructure, production, other aspects also is available, and how ready it is, right? So you could see also that there is a lot of facilities, or a lot of projects being able to be to pass the FID and being implemented. This is another things as well. So what you see, the problem also is you see that demand and production, or demand and supply, are not matching, right? But there is already few aspects. And again, looking into what type of business, what kind of ships, what does is the infrastructure available. There is a lot of things that makes you also a lot of factors choose or take the acceptable risk on what are you going to do,
Right.
right?
Okay. And what about the IMO global price mechanism? I mean, you said it's just now, sort of, I suppose, this year coming into, or going to last October, there was some voting on that. Again, the prospects for that, the IMO global price mechanism, is that something that's imminent? What are the prospects of it being adopted? What do you think would be the possible obstacles to that?
Well, again, IMO also mechanism is working into looking into intensity plus having a levy, right? So,
Mm,
and that also changed. Okay, so 2%, maybe up to 70%, or also having come kind of tier one, tier two, tier three. Okay, so it's a kind of, so you can be hit by the
yeah.
lower tier to the higher tier, which is right now is if I'm having it out of my head, $100 to $380 for the ton CO2. So that is also challenging. Okay, since you also don't know again which fuel is going to be promoted. That's one. Where what is your deficit really, and how this limits or caps or whatever you want to call it is going to change. Okay, one fuel can be compliant today, tomorrow not.
Yeah. That seems to be
Okay,
the big question.
yeah, and the whole idea also of the global pricing mechanism is, hey, I'm going to have money coming in from penalties, And eventually, I am going to use this money to promote the production of zero emission fuel. Now, the question always is, who's controlling this surplus? Who's controlling this money? How you're going to divide this evenly, or how are you going to divide this between which fuel, between which countries?
Yeah.
Okay, so there is a lot, of course, of caveats here and there, and can detail and talk more and more about it. But there is already some white spots and so on. And again, is it going to be overruling, or is it going to be with the other ones? Okay, which way? So do I have this cost, this cost, this cost, this cost? Okay, and you have a lot of documentation also to prepare for and so on. That's also one of the friction also that is currently is giving headaches to a lot of people.
Okay. Well, a lot of question marks for the shipping industry, it seems, Giselle. And perhaps we can just close our discussion with that whether these uncertainties, depends what fuel comes next, what's being implemented the most. It's not an easy investment environment, but the shipping sector is very resilient, as we know. Has any of this, push towards decarbonization, has it encouraged more M&A? Perhaps from a cost competitiveness point of view, do you see that becoming a factor amongst different shipping companies? Would that help them make these bold decisions that they need to make?
I think it has been taken seriously. Maybe before it was just talk, but now really, I think the maritime shipping sector is taking this seriously, right? Because again, it involves money and higher cost, but also because there is the good intention to really decarbonize. So that, and also you see, if I'm looking into different governments, and maybe I can talk about mine at this moment, they are also taking this seriously and including it in the plan, right? The yearly plan, when they're looking into investment plan, in EU also level. So in one way, this is being taken seriously, I would say.
Gisele Widdershoven, founder and strategic advisor at Blue Water Strategy. Thanks so much for joining us today on Halftime Talk and giving us your thoughts on the shipping sector and the decarbonization agenda. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
very much again for hosting me.